off here as we've got all of our speakers raring to go. So thank you all for joining us today for this live talk session. This one's in partnership with Ecotricity. So I'll spare you the pun of how electrifying the conversation will be, but we'll get into it soon enough. So this will be exploring the partnership with Ecotricity, looking at real scalable solutions for low carbon energy in the live event sector. We're going to look at some case studies, look at how that applies to policy, and hopefully offer some insights for various corners of the industry. A quick bit of housekeeping. I'm not going to take up too much time before I hand over to Anthony, who will shepherd us on this journey. But please note that today's call is being recorded. If you would like to remain anonymous, please change your name to anonymous, and could everyone please keep their mics on mute unless you're speaking, just to avoid any interference. I think that's about it. Please do put any questions in the chat. Feel free to engage. We'll do our best to pick those up as we go along. There might be some time at the end to cover off any sort of conversation that's been missed as well. So I'll be here sort of co-piloting and supporting Anthony. But without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Anthony, to kick us off. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, Ross. Thank you very much. In terms of order of events, I am going to spew out a monologue for about 30 minutes and hopefully not bore everybody senseless. And then we've got some interesting chats coming in from a few different angles related to some decarbonisation work that's been going on in festival land recently. So, for those of you that don't know me, I thought a quick intro could be pertinent. So my name is Anthony Vorvietz. I'm a direct business development manager for Ecotricity, and I work mainly across the creative sectors, so live music, TV and film, and a bit of visual arts and some charity and not-for-profit in the mix as well. The direct part of my job title is important to highlight. It's a small word, but it does make a big difference. Excuse me, my hay fever's rife today. In energy speak, because I'm part of a team that works directly with my customers, as the name would suggest. So I don't work with brokers or TPIs ordinarily. I must confess, I do have a little bit of imposter syndrome here, as I'm fairly new to the energy sector. However, and perhaps more importantly, before I pivoted across, I spent about a decade working in the wine industry with both the on and off trade. And before that, spent 7 years on the circuit as an event manager and an AV tech. So hopefully with those pivots, I come to you with a decent understanding of what your world actually looks like. So I think also as a relative newbie, I'm quite mindful of ensuring that I don't use too much technical jargon and I keep the energy speak quite approachable. So if I do say anything that doesn't make any sense, flag me, and firstly, apologies, and secondly, do let me know. Right, let's get a slide on the go. Can I actually make it work? Ross, has the slide changed?
We're looking good. All changed.
So I'm going to do an introduction to Ecotricity first, and then a little bit about what we're doing in the sector, and then we'll drill right down to some of the tactics that we've got going on to help you guys on your decarbonisation and sustainability journeys. So it's our 30th birthday this year, celebrating 3 decades as the world's first green energy company. Our founder is Dale Vince, who uses business as a tool for environmental impact. Now, the description that has sign off from our marketing department to describe Ecotricity is that we are a UK-based, vertically integrated energy supplier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick those bits apart and tell you exactly what they mean. The UK bit is fairly self-explanatory, but it is a genuine point of difference against a lot of the other providers in our sector. So our workforce, including our highly awarded and venerated customer services team, are all UK based. And our business model is not for dividend. And that has particular significance with the UK-based bit because it means that we reinvest our profits in the building of more renewable assets here in the UK to drive the green economy with job creation and continually improving the fuel mix as well. So the UK-based bit, I think, is actually quite significant. Vertically integrated means we have our own generation assets, such as wind turbines, solar farms, and green gas mills, and we are also a supplier. So we are an Ofgem certified 100% renewable supplier. We have no nuclear in our fuel mix, unlike some of our lighter green competitors, and we are also certified vegan to boot. I do kind of fly in the face of the marketing line and say that we are not just an energy supplier, we are a renewable energy innovator. Because another thing about Ecotricity that makes us unique is that we are one member of a sustainable alliance of companies called the Green Britain Group. I think there's currently about 18 of us. I say currently as we're constantly welcoming new ventures into the family. And this gives us one of our greatest strengths. With so many strings to our bow, we can be so much more than an energy supplier, which is why we're able to come up with some really bespoke and tailored solutions for our customers, our partners, and our collaborators. One of the other benefits of the Green Britain Group is that we can use it as a vehicle for sharing best practices. And this is something that I'm going to talk about a few times as we go through today, because one of the things that I have seen in a number of the different creative industries is that forum to be able to share best practices, to talk about successes, to talk about the things that were difficult. Because I think the more we can engage with each other within our sectors, the faster these roadmaps to decarbonisation and sustainability can be enacted. So this is another thing that makes Ecotricity unique, and I think it's another real strength of ours. So to sum up where we are at with Ecotricity, I'm going to loop back to that definition again, the UK-based vertically integrated energy supplier. And the tweak I'm going to give it is, and it's taken me about a year to come up with this, I promise I'm not just doing it on the fly. I think we should be describing ourselves as a UK-based, vertically integrated, renewable energy innovator. Because when you pull together all of those different things that we can do, like we have our own wind turbine manufacturing company called Britwind, there's our partnership with Grid Fairies, led by the wonderful Claire O'Neill from AGF, who we have the pleasure of today. They've made the UK's largest battery, which has been used to decarbonise music festivals like Glastonbury, WOMAD and Lido. We've got Equilibrium, who are building out our smart grid technology, and we are launching our Feeder Pillars project as well to deliver grid connections for users across the creative industries. So getting renewable energy to where we need it can often be a challenge, and that's where a little bit of innovation helps. And I think that's really where Ecotricity is trying to be quite trailblazing. Oh, I've gone too early. I had more to say. Right, we'll skip the next paragraph that I was going to read you. So, live music, why is it one of Ecotricity's focus sectors? Now, I'm going to assume this is a fairly safe space. So there's a big part of it that comes from Dale and his love of live music. He set up a windmill at Glastonbury back in the 90s, and before that lived on the road in his trucks and his vans, and as such was a regular attendee on the festival circuit. So he's very invested in the scene, in the people, and the joy of the event. In addition to having the massive support of the founder, which of course always helps, the impact that your industries have on the public is massive. I appreciate that I'm preaching to the choir here, but when international artists start having green riders and it draws in the national press, people, i.e. the fans, start listening up to the messaging. And I think finally, it's that willingness to do. The opportunity to help change an industry requires a certain portfolio of skills. A good working knowledge of it is essential. collaborators, access to the available technologies, the clout to help influence policy, and also the ability to sometimes put money second and doing the right thing first. So we've always punched above our weight in terms of our market effect at Ecotricity, which is why hopefully we do believe that we are the right partner for all of those creative industries. And that is my sales pitch done. So that's the Ecotricity bit done with. Let's have a look at what's going on in your industry and talk about some of the things that we're doing within Ecotricity to try and help. One of the biggest sustainability or decarbonisation issues facing permanent venues, and I might also add perhaps the lowest hanging fruit in terms of how you can solve it, is access to the cleanest, greenest, renewable energy available to help reduce the Scope 2 emissions. Now, once you've made a choice, that supplier may need to stand up to an internal audit, or perhaps external audits, the scrutiny of the board, or dare I say it, your actual customers. So making a change is relatively easy in terms of levers to pull, but making the right choice is crucial to the journey. Now, that choice is often linked to the cost, as renewables often come with a premium attached to them. And normally, it's not out of spite, it's normally because they use more nascent technologies and do not always benefit from the same economies of scale as conventional fossil fuels and nuclear. So I'm going to look shortly at how Ecotricity can help here when it comes to the pricing. The pesky Scope 3s are huge and require a real mammoth effort to solve. When I talk about Scope 3 emissions, I mean those things that I'm referring to on the slide. So the transport to the workplace, the festival or the arena, the food provision on site, which is those upstream carbon costs that need to be addressed. And that's why I will keep talking about that need for peer-to-peer learning and a community space where best practices can be shared. And I know that's a lot of what Live Green does already. As a reaction to it within Ecotricity, though, we have created what we're calling the lead strategy. Now, rest assured, it's not a long document. It's actually more of a statement of intent. In fact, if anything, just reading it, it's a really long sentence with some impeccable punctuation. So this was our way of trying to sum up how we could support a number of different creative industries that actually all have very similar problems, and the solutions to solving those problems are also very similar too. In doing so, we really are trying to set our stall out as being the go-to provider across TV, film, live music, and other creative sectors for energy. And at the same time, if we can help to identify some of those other key successes for food provision, waste management, for example, then we can act as a conduit to share them as well. Let's play to my strengths, though, and focus on energy. I say play to my strengths. I've already divulged you that I've only been in the industry a very short amount of time, but hopefully this is one of my strengths. So this is what we've been working on, the tactics that we're deploying through the lead strategy. So as I said, Claire O'Neill is here today to discuss some grid fairies and some battery news, so I won't spoil any surprises there. Feeder pillars is something that I'm heavily involved in at the moment. And the best way to describe them is a permanent junction box for temporary events. So it's plug and play style. You can use them to charge batteries instead of putting the diesel in the jennies, or you could actually use them to directly power events. Or in the case of TV and film, you could use them to power unit bases. Some of the speakers here will probably also have some feedback on feeder pillars as well, I imagine. So I'm going to concentrate on my bread and butter, which are the Scope 2s of the permanent venues. And I'm going to spend a little time talking about this because whilst you've seen what we can do in terms of all the sexy stuff with wind turbines, smart grids and storage assets, I did just use sexy stuff and storage assets in the same sentence. I think I might have reached a peak in my energy career too soon. But we've got all the sexy stuff that we can do, but it does all start with your business as usual energy supply. So what I'm going to talk about now for the next few minutes is that energy supply and how we can provide some additional value to you as an energy supplier using a mechanism called energy baskets. I've already explained this to Ross, so I think this might get a bit more conversational in a minute. I've been the master of my own demise here because originally these slides were created to be sent out and digested in isolation. And I feel like I did such a good job on them. I don't really have much left to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through what I've written down and give a little bit more colour to it. And then if there's anything at this point that sort of brings up any questions from anybody, do chime in, because it may well be that this is the bit where I'm talking about a technical energy product and perhaps it needs a little further explanation. So an energy basket really is a way to collectively purchase energy for any number of individual entities, but still contract them separately. So that means you could have, let's say, 100 different music venues all around the UK grouping their energy purchasing together. And the mechanics of how we actually do it is we put what's called a coterminous end date into it, which means that everybody's contracts end at the same time. So it doesn't matter how long you've got left. It does matter how long you've got left on your existing energy contract. What matters is that once we contract you, all of those energy contracts end at the same time. So we might say, let's put a coterminous end date in of October 2026. Some people joining the energy basket might have 3 months left of their contract until October 26. Some people might have 12 months. Some people might have 15 months. By having them all end at the same time, what we then do is the day after, on the day that the contracts end, we purchase all of those entities' individual consumption requirements for energy at the same time. And by buying it all together, because all the contracts ended at the same time, we can generate economies of scale through that purchase. So earlier on, when I was talking about how the desire to purchase renewable energy can sometimes fly in the face of perhaps what's coming from the finance department, an energy basket is a really useful mechanism that we can use to reduce those costs for the individual entities, and still allow them to contract separately, but apply some of those collective economies of scale. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of the mechanics behind it. There's a little bit more on the next slide about it. They do confer some additional benefits though, as well as just the pricing. If you are a really high energy user, you will have access to certain products, which mean that you can actually go even deeper green in terms of your energy supply. What I'm talking about specifically here are things called PPAs. So that's power purchase agreements. A power purchase agreement links your consumption to the generation of a specific asset. So normally what happens is all of the energy goes onto the grid, and you don't know perhaps as well as you should do where that energy is coming from. So a PPA is a way of best validating the quality of the renewable energy that you're purchasing. If you're a really small music venue, chances are your consumption isn't going to be enough to give you access to a PPA. If you're part of an energy basket, then we can do it. So PPAs is one thing. We've just launched a fantastic product called real-time REGOs as well. A REGO is the certificate that attaches to renewable energy, and our real-time REGOs product means that at the end of the accounting period, you will get a certificate that shows exactly what assets were used to create the energy that you've consumed. So it's kind of a step down from a PPA, but again, it's a product that requires a little bit more consumption to make it worthwhile. So energy baskets give you that product access. By grouping together the demand, we can then start applying these even deeper levels of green energy. And again, I know I've mentioned it before, but it can lead to a collaborative forum where people can share best practices. And I think in terms of the sharing and caring, in terms of the sharing and caring that's produced in this model of energy baskets, it's really nice to appreciate that those bigger national, what's the word I'm looking for? Those bigger national arenas, the stadiums that we've got around the country, who in themselves have fairly decent consumption chunks, that volume can really help the purchasing power of the smaller grassroots venues around the country. So there's a really conferred benefit, a tangible conferred benefit that can derive from having those big players in the mix as well as those small ones. And the way that we've seen an opportunity for the back scratch to take place is that a lot of the interesting work that the smaller venues are doing that are perhaps a bit more nimble than those national actors can then be shared, and the successes proliferated back up the stream again. How am I doing for time? Okay, right.
Oh, just very quickly, Anthony, before you move, I've dropped 2 questions in the chat that relates to baskets, but you may be coming onto this. I just wanted to make sure that we cover those off. So I've just said in there who can join the basket, and in this case we're calling it the lees, and how would that entity go about making the switch. So if you're not already about to come onto that, let's cover that off on the way.
So we kept the acronym pretty wide open, actually, which is why we called it the Live Events Energy Scheme, because we didn't want any particular entities to feel like they couldn't join us. So live events, we really felt went all the way from music venues, the small caps, the mid caps, and the stadium level, event spaces such as the NECs and Excels of the world, theatres, anywhere where there is a live performance that takes place. We consider the Lees basket to be open. We haven't got a separate basket for sports stadiums, and I'm talking to a number of different sports stadiums at the moment because they of course host music events from time to time. So at the moment, I'd just say it is a very, very broad church. And if you're interested, if you're interested and want to know, just give me a shout. So you could contact me directly. I would suggest the best way of doing it though, and I'm not going to jump forward to it now, only because I haven't worked out how to jump backwards within Zoom, is to use the Lee's email address, which is going to show up at the end of the presentation. I'm not going to try and do it ad verbatim because I can't remember if it's .com or .uk, but I think it's just lees@ecotricity.co.uk.
Brilliant, thank you.
No worries. So this is a little bit more about the nitty gritty of how an energy basket works. So when Ecotricity acts as a supplier, we have about 13% of our fuel mix is stuff that we generate ourselves, so from our own wind turbines and our own solar farms. That number was significantly higher, but we've done really well in the last few years and we've got a lot of customers, and unfortunately the political landscape hasn't meant that we could build a lot of assets to support that. So we're just at the stage now where we're trying to grow the percentage of our own generation within our total portfolio. But at the moment, it's about sort of 13% that we generate ourselves. The rest of it we go out and purchase from the wholesale market, and our fuel mix is uniquely 100% renewable. There's no nuclear in there. So when we go out and purchase it from the wholesale market, we buy it in these chunks called clips. And when we buy the clips, the more clips we buy on a certain day, the better the discount we get for buying them. So if we can go out and purchase an entire energy basket's worth of clips on the same day, you can see where this is going, you get the economies of scale just by virtue of the fact that we're buying more volume from the wholesale market at once. Now, there are a couple of technical things that happen to that volume to do with tolerances and shaping. So every energy consuming entity in the land has what's called a curve attached to it, which is, imagine it as an energy company knowing when you tend to turn on the telly, when you tend to turn on the kettle. And what they do is they shape and profile your energy consumption. And it's normally a kind of classic bell curve. what we're able to do by creating a basket is blend everybody's shapes together and then spread the tolerance and the risk that is associated with that energy supply. So first of all, you've got the simple economies of scale, but then a couple of other things that have to happen in the background that a supplier does, which makes up part of your bill. We can then help to reduce those as well. And it's all to do with just bringing different kinds of consumption together, different volumes, different consumption habits. And by doing that, that's how we get the price that's best for everybody. So that last slide, that last part on this slide really is true. The more customers we have in an energy basket, the better it is for all of the entities within it. We work with some fantastic people, and we'd love to work with you too. So to Ross's point, if you're interested in the Lee's basket, please do give us a shout. We would love to understand what you want to get out of it. Is it part of the decarbonisation journey? Is it the altruistic helping out your sector? We'd love to have a chat about it. So yeah, please get in touch with either Jane or myself directly. If it's specifically to do with the Lee's Energy Scheme, though, please use this email address here. I would imagine that being as this is recorded, should we send this out with it as well, Ross? We can send the whole presentation if you want, then people can have a copy of it.
Yeah, if you're happy to do that, that would be fantastic. And I've just put that email address in the chat as well, so people can grab it nice and easy.
Lovely, lovely. Well, I didn't practice it, but that was 29 minutes, so I feel like I've achieved. That was good. Coming up next, we've got a variety of speakers. So I think first on the running list is going to be Ed Butler from LS. Ed, if it is indeed you, can you give us a shout?
It can be me.
Wicked. Ready and raring. Amazing. So Ed was, what's your proper title?
So my proper title is Operations Director across Lido and All Points East Festival, and I work for LS Events. LS Events being the lead production agency for AEG, delivering kind of the site design, management, procurement, event operations, and leading on all things licensing local authority.
Okay. And why did you and I have particular chance to cross paths recently?
It was all to do with AEG's ambition of this new show Lido, and it being a more sustainable venture for the music and festival industries. And we got talking when Ecotricity and Grid Ferries had some conversations with AEG about providing clean energy for the site, and then the conversation started on how to make that possible. But yeah, it took a lot of persuasion and negotiation with local authorities, utilising the existing feeder pillars with some updates and some modifications to make it viable and fit for purpose. But yeah, that was the journey that was started to get Lido as much on grid as possible.
I think it's fair to say that as with anytime you try to reshape an industry a little bit, it's always the unknown unknowns that are the real sticking points. What would you say in terms of sharing some best practices with other people out there who maybe do organise really large festivals, who are looking for decarbonisation strategies that involve, let's talk more about the grid than the batteries, because I know Claire's going to talk about the battery. But using the grid, what would you say are your, I don't know, top 3 or top 2, make sure you do this, make sure you think about this before you go down those paths?
I'd say timelines are crucial, always build in that contingency. Thankfully, we got it ahead of time, but it was close to the wire in getting those final permissions and those upgrades completed. Look at what is available, look at what potential upgrades can be made, and kind of work within the limitations. We looked at potential upgrades to the connection in terms of increasing capacity, but in terms of timelines, that wasn't viable. So we looked at how we could consolidate the existing supply into a more usable kind of output. So we worked with Pierce Hire, who are going to speak a little bit later on about how we upgraded the connection within the box, so consolidating all of the individual connections that were primarily there for film and TV unit bases into one power lock connection that we were then able to maximize the draw out of the box and into the batteries.
Okay, so that's the electricity side of it. In terms of things that maybe, because they use battery tech instead of conventional diesel, because you were using battery tech and grid connections instead of conventional diesel generators, which seems like a sensible way to decarbonise a festival. What were other things that perhaps surprised you? And I'm thinking maybe to do with insurance, the public, fire, health. Were there any other things that you would say, look into these specifics as part of that sort of preliminary scoping exercise that you do for a festival?
Yeah, I think through kind of the licensing, because LS Events lead on the licensing for the AG festivals, it's that coordination between the multi-agency groups, the fire brigades, the other kind of local authority groups, as well as emergency services, and it's all about validating the intended use of relevant, like, new technology within the industry, but not new technology within kind of everyday life. It's validating and that reassurance piece that goes a long way, especially with local authority and fire service. There was a lot of negotiations on site design, where we placed the battery, how we were able to fulfill certain obligations, and from a safety and security point of view as well, making sure that infrastructure is in line of sight, is functional, but also safe and secure if anything were to go awry.
Nice. And I think perhaps sticking on that broader approach the broader approach that we're discussing at the moment, there was the energy aspect to the festival as well, but there were other strings to the sustainable strategy, weren't there, as well? So what other things were you looking at to try and really maximize that sustainability aspect?
Yeah, so Lido, with its kind of inception, had three objectives known as pillars, and that was the community side of things, the creativity, and sustainability. And sustainability was then broken down into three separate streams of power, waste, and carbon. So we looked at power, how we could kind of reduce fuel burn within standard generators and power design for the event site. We also looked at waste streams and how we could maximize efficiencies through dedicated waste streams front of house. So making a conscious effort to go down the can only route across our bars, trying to maximize that efficiency through that front of house waste stream collection, as well as food and serveware. So everything was compostable, no single-use plastics. So really driving home that public front of house message of these are the two bins that you can put your waste into. And that was then fully backed up with a back of house waste sorting facility that then maximised our recycling rates. But in terms of power, it was unpicking the overall kind of site design, taking our experiences from All Points East, a similar festival in a similar footprint, understanding the learnings and data driven from that festival, to then make tweaks and build Lido from the ground up with the more sustainable mentality.
Nice. And with the concessions in particular, because the scope threes are often so hard to work on for things like festivals and understanding exactly the upstream supply chain, how did the interactions go with the concessions in terms of you selling them the dream and the vision, them getting on board with it? Was it pushing water up a hill? Was it quite easy? Was everybody on board? What would you say anecdotally was the situation there?
So looking at battery power within festivals is new, and trying to get that across to your traders and your general your sponsors on site, getting an understanding of, we've got a finite amount of power on site to sustain a show day, and people need to work within that. There was a lot of work done with kind of the receiving the data, the analysing of the data, conversations with traders just to unpick why you're requesting X amount, and then post-event analysing what they actually used. So with Lido, we've managed to capture quite a lot of data behind the scenes then to inform future festival designs and improve efficiencies going forward. But it was, yeah, very much understanding the usage, unpicking the requests and validating the requests.
I think this is something, and again, talking on a cross-sector level, it's something in TV and film that is a perennial problem. It's that over-speccing. And then, of course, you over-spec the power, you just have the diesel generators running on standby, so you've got a lot of fuel just being used up before there's any load applied to it. So it's really hard to get access to the data, but also find out exactly how much energy do people really need as opposed to what they think they need. I imagine Jake will probably have some comments on that as well.
I won't steal Jake's limelight on the
Exactly.
technicality and the data that went into making this a possibility.
Exactly. Amazing. Thank you very much, Ed. If there's anything else you want to chip it in now. Otherwise, I'm going to see if we've got Claire available to have a chat to us about the grid ferry specific element of what was going on in Lido and this summer.
Other than it was a really great show, we've learned a lot, and we're looking to implement these systems across other AEG festivals as well. So Lido is the first of an exciting future.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers, buddy. Claire, are you there?
Yo, I am. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great. So yeah, I'll give a bit of a background about Grid Fairies, how it came about, the stuff that we've been working on, and I guess what's coming next in that respect. For those who don't know me and my background, I've co-founded A Greener Future about 20 years ago. And as a part of that, we've done assessments of hundreds, probably thousands of events around the world, a lot in the UK and Europe. And through that process, over the last couple of decades, saw this persistent problem that's already been talked about of over-speccing, requiring too much energy or not having an understanding of energy demands that's always put upon the power contractors to just deliver whatever is asked for at any point in time. But also that we've used the same event sites again and again and again, and we keep trucking in diesel generators again and again and again. So it's been very clear in my mind for a long time, and for many in the industry, that we needed to start putting grid connections into our common event sites so that we could stop the trucking and stop the burning of fuel. So when I met Dale, he's obviously, as Anthony's given an intro to, has a big background in renewable energy. So we kind of brought our two worlds together, where I'd been on the festival and event scene, Dale's been in the energy scene, and we're like, well, perhaps we can start something that can help to fund grid connections in event sites. So the idea initially was that if a grid connection or a feeder pillar would cost X amount, and then by providing the electricity within 5 to 10 years that pays back, then we could help to kickstart these grid builds essentially into sites. So that's the initial idea. And then my other job has been as an aerialist for maybe 8 years with Arcadia specifically. And they're kind of my family, I guess, in that respect. And Arcadia needed to, or wanted to, have the new Dragonfly stage powered by fully green electricity. But there was no way we could get a grid connection put in there in time from when the idea kind of came about within Glastonbury. So this is how we ended up getting a battery in the first instance, which was like the stepping stone in that respect. And it wasn't a small one. It was a 1 megawatt battery, which has got 3 megawatt hours of power crammed into it. And this was used initially thinking it's kind of a stopgap, but actually as time's gone on, we've realized, well, it's very common sense actually to have grid connections that are a reasonable size, that are affordable to put in, and then supplement them with batteries so that you can reach those peaks that are perhaps only 2-3 times a year on a site. So this is what we had for the first time on Lido. We had the opportunity to do that with the charging of the battery directly from the grid. which I'll come back onto. But prior to that, our first outing was with Arcadia, the Dragonfly at Glastonbury last year. And there we topped up with HVO while we were there. The twinning of the battery with HVO is something that's been done on event sites for a long time. I think the first time I saw a battery on a site was 2018, maybe, at Digital in Amsterdam. And then Pierce, Power Logistics, others have teamed up with Greener Power for many years on smaller batteries, or 420 batteries as well, if you're into the text, the numbers. And this can reduce the amount of HVO that's consumed really significantly because it deals with the peak shaving. So rather than a big asymmetric load where it's going up and down and it's inefficient, you can have a constant load where it's nice and efficient. That was the first way that we used it. Then we used it on WOMAD Festival and on the second stage, which was pretty much acoustic. And that was like really overkill. So we didn't need any extra charging on that one. And then the third outing was along with Jamal and the Massive Attack team. We did Massive Attack on the Downs last year. And this was the first time that, so we had the big ass battery, as we call it, on the main stage. On this site, again, we had no access to grid. So that recharging was a big issue. So Jamal spent a lot of time gathering other batteries as well. I won't go into too much detail because he can give insight on that. But we did the entire site then purely on battery with recharging with batteries and electric vehicles and CNGs. Going back to the fact that on Lido, we came in with grid and battery. This was really an eye-opener. There were lots of different issues that we hadn't encountered before related to dealing with the district, the DNOs, so district network operators, they're called in this case, UK Power Networks. It's been a really good process because it means now we have a relationship with the right people within those organizations. They're essentially the people that control the grid. And what we found is it's not just an obstacle of cash, which was our initial plan with grid ferries, to be able to actually front the cost, but it's also an issue with the relationships, the lag, the delay, the complexity of actually getting these grid connections put in. So by doing things like what we did together with the team who are here speaking today on Lido, it helps to kind of expose where some of those obstacles are. So things like a computer says no approach to DNO applications is one of the issues. Then there's really a great benefit of putting in a piece of technology like the battery, which Ed has also described, is that it exposes the lack of understanding, I guess, that we have in the industry as far as what power we need. And this is even with some of like the highest class, top quality productions in the world. And still the power understanding is very limited. And this is something that Jake and Pierce and all the power contractors have experienced for decades. But this helps to really shine a light on it and bring the power conversation and those gaps in knowledge into the light, shall we say, and into the people's, I suppose, onto the people's desks who can do something about it. So I may stop there because I think Jake and Jamal would be good to go into more detail.
Amazing. Thank you, Claire. That was a great synopsis. I think on my list, I've got Jake. You ready to chat?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. I think probably the first question I'm going to throw out is just on site, what did you find? What was the biggest difference between working with a conventional generator setup and working with, to use Claire's words, a big ass battery?
The biggest difference?
Yeah.
The biggest difference is sort of you've got to get everyone's head around that it isn't just a generator and you can't just turn it on and off when you need to, and getting other people that are plugged into such a battery to understand that we're working with extremely different technology. In terms of the distribution of the stage and stuff for us, that was the same. How we did the physical wiring, there wasn't so much of a difference there, but it's getting people to understand there is a limit to what you're working with, a limit as opposed to let's just keep adding generators to the system.
That sounds like a nice soundbite for life, actually. It's finite. Take
Yeah.
care of it, please. Don't just expect that it's going to be there forever.
And the big ass battery was actually totally suitable for what we were using it for at Lido. In terms of load and stuff like that, it was more than capable of providing what we needed it to provide, as we saw it did. It did every night, no problem. The big challenge is obviously batteries store it, they don't create it. So as Claire was saying, you know, you've got to find somewhere to recharge it from. So such as the Arcadia problem. And we're fortunate to have the mains connection at Lido. So it was just having that difference of ensuring we had enough charge for the festival days coming through.
Yeah.
And then the biggest challenge we see overall at all shows is that people just don't really know what they're asking for. Like, for example, we had a sponsor at Lido ask for enough power, which would have powered quarter of the festival, according to our data, and that's because they had misunderstandings between watts and kilowatts. So, which is what obviously we can pick up on things like that. We saw that and we went back and said, we don't think that you need that much power. But the thing is, the first kind of port of call of decarbonisation in events is you've got to reduce the consumption. That's the first thing, and that's what we spent a lot of time working through on Lido. We built a template of a power bible, which is what they did on the Massive Attack show, and we went through every single aspect of the site, which was every trader had to tell us exactly what they were using, and every sponsor had to tell us exactly what they were using. And it wasn't just like, oh, we want a 32 free here, we want a 32 single there, we want a power lock over there. We went through every single line of every single connection on the site, asked them for what they accurately wanted. We then took a judgment call on whether we agreed with that or not, put a second sort of actual column in, then added the diversity because not everything's switched on at the same time. Like if someone asks for 3 kilowatt for their kettle, they're not boiling their kettle from 9 o'clock in the morning until midnight. So we have to factor that into the power usage. But getting people to sort of understand that they need to tell us exactly what they need was challenging, and getting people on board with the different way of looking at it was also not challenging, but you know, you've got lots of people that are on board with it straight away, and then you've got other people which struggle to get on board with how it works, and that makes it difficult for us because across the whole site for periods of time we were using batteries. So we were limited on how much power we had. We used the data from All Points East. We took that data, transformed it, cut it up, moved it into Lido sections of data. We built a recharge schedule for the whole site based on that data. And there wasn't spare power. Like there was some contingency in our pocket, but if we hadn't have gone through that process, we would have never have known if we'd had enough power to run the gig. The main difference is that with the battery stuff, you have to plan your energy a lot more than you do with the HVO or diesel, because with HVO or diesel, you can just call the tanker in and put it in the tanks. And that's a really quick process. Whereas moving energy from big batteries to big batteries, it takes a little bit of time. So you just have to consider that. But I think the biggest issues that we saw, we do have this commonly, this isn't unheard of, is that artists and productions coming in to all festivals, most of them don't really understand power. So there's a lot of production managers and people in the world that don't have the understanding of power that a power contractor would, or a green energy supplier would, for example. That's okay. We're not expecting those guys to do our jobs, but where we need to make a difference is we really need for stage power is accurate meter readings for incoming artists and incoming sort of production. So we were quite clever at Lido this year. We broke down all the elements of the house production. So we've taken monitoring. Well, we monitored everything. We have so much data now from Lido that we are now processing, and we monitored all the different supplies. But what we did on the stage especially was we took the lighting supplies, the audio supplies, the video supplies, broke them all down, metered them all individually, so we can look at the data of what the suppliers asked for versus what they actually used and say, this is how out you are. And they are out. They're always out because they use manufacturer's specs. And they also use manufacturer's specs based on it being switched on from 9 in the morning till midnight. That's the difference. When lights are flashing, they're using different amount. It's called diversity, so it doesn't use as much power. So we've got accurate readings now for all of those elements. And that's fine. That's good for us as a house production, and we can look at that for next year. But the problem still comes back to incoming talent. Yeah, we've got data on the artists that have come this year, but they're not going to come back next year, and it's not the same production. So what we really need is incoming talent to tell us exactly what they need and it be right. Whereas 9 times out of 10 it's wrong, and that can cause us some real headaches. We had a bit of a headache this year where one of the headliners very late in the day came with some power information that was not more than the battery was capable of powering, but more than the wiring sort of system was capable of delivering, because that size of power had never been on the table. And as you do, we head scratched, we came up with a solution to power it. It was all fine. And then they didn't use anywhere near the power that they were asking for. Now, that's kind of okay on the battery because it didn't change our impact. It caused a lot of people a few headaches, which was frustrating, but the guys on site were good and they handled it. But on a generator setup, and this is where the issue is, we would have put enough generator power in to power that show, because that's what we've been asked for, and we have to provide that. If we've been asked for it, we have to deliver what is being requested. So, because on the off chance, every now and again, someone will ask for that much power and they will use it. So you have to deliver what the artists are asking for. But 9 times out of 10, they ask for X and use Y, and Y is considerably lower. And that's the problem.
That is the perfect segue to bring in Jamal. How can we upstream this problem to a point where we can make a tangible impact on solving this data issue? And I guess hopefully a tour manager and sustainable trailblazer will be able to tell us. Are you still there, Jamal?
I am.
Amazing.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, look, it's something we've been dealing with and been discussing for 4 years. Just a quick intro. I'm a tour manager, production manager for tour manager for Massive Attack. I'm also head of a greener tool for Ecotricity. Sorry, for a greener future. And this is something that we've been discussing internally for a long time. It really is about speccing, and this is what I'm trying to do within the Massive Attack camp, is for them to, follow good practice and deliver that correct information, because we are just over-speccing ridiculously. I won't go over old ground, whichever is discussed there. So yeah, it's definitely about changing culture and changing practice, and we all know what we need to do. It's just actually changing that mindset for people to get on board with it, and not just one, but all of the whole industry. Part of what I've been trying to do is encourage a 360 conversation with every single level and all departments right across the industry, so they can all make the shift and all make the jump. Because once it happens across the board, then we're going to see massive changes. We're also going to be seeing massive savings, and I think that's the real key here. Not just savings in CO2 emissions, but also toxic emissions into our neighbourhoods, but also money. But everybody has to get on board with that, and this is the real key, which is why I so celebrate what the team has done here. And the data that we've collected will prove and point that we're just over-speccing and emitting probably within the region of 50-60% more than we actually need to. And if we follow to the letter with what we've done here, we can reduce it even further. Does that answer your question?
It certainly does. What, and this might be a question that is unanswerable, but what impact can the artists themselves have in your holistic vision of trying to make sure that everybody is on board together?
Well, I think this is my opinion here differs to a lot of people's opinion, because I personally don't think it's the artist's responsibility, because the artist, yes, artists are great at messaging, and I think that's really, really important. But as soon as you put an artist there at the front of this, they're there to be here, put their head above the parapet, and they become very, very vulnerable, which is why we see only one or two very big artists or very brave artists sticking their necks out. There's a huge amount of artists out there. There's a very few of them sticking their heads above the parapet. This really is fundamental to the industry itself. It's down to the venues, it's down to the festivals, it's down to the promoters, it's also down to the shareholders that own those promoters to make the difference here, because they control the venues 365 days a year, whereas an artist is only in those venues for maybe 1, 2, 3 days. So there's limited effect. And I think it not only of the promoters and the large agencies need to get on board with this. If they don't do it soon enough, we're going to be losing festivals. We're going to be losing events, because they're going to be subject to climate change, extreme climate change. I'm seeing it every single day when I'm out there. And it's going to cost them more money to put in resilience when they should be spending more money in creating the systems that will reduce the impact. So again, it's we need to cure the disease and not the symptoms.
That's a really good point. And I think the fact that we know that the feeder pillar in Victoria Park was partly funded through mayoral grants that were given because of the clean air provision for the parks, that suggests that the legacy that's already flowing through from the Tower Hamlets feeder pillar is that it needs to be holistic, it needs to be a joined up approach. And yeah, it's not about necessarily making up for the previous indiscretions. It's actually about forging plans for the future and putting the infrastructure in place.
It's also, you've got to, every time with sustainability, you've got to sort of go 10 frames back, because there's so many other implications, like the toxins that we're releasing. The inner city London. I mean, there was a headline today: 500 people a day are dying from lung disease, and this is the sort of stuff we've got to look at. How much is that costing us on the NHS? So don't spend less money on the NHS and more money on making things more resilient and cleaner. And that's what we should be looking at, because it's not just about CO2, it's also about toxins.
Yeah, I think probably the clean air policies that are becoming more and more prolific around the country will have a massive top-down impact on how infrastructure build-out is viewed in inner city areas. So fingers crossed.
Yeah,
The good work that John Collins is doing will prevail, and we will get some capacity that we need.
I think the other thing that needs to be focused on, and what the team has done here, is that this is the ripple effect of what we're doing here. It's pretty much like the space race. It's the amount of people that are now asking questions. Because my role on this was to bring knowledge that Claire and I gathered from the Downs into Lido, and also provide resilience. We provided a recharging system with electric trucks. We also reached out to the electric bus company that had a charging stations, near the festival. So we found resilience there. If anything happened with the grid, we had 1, 2, 3 places to go and recharge that. We also brought in hydrogen as well to run a remote part of the festival too. So we brought in certain systems of resilience so everyone could breathe easier and do this. But the ripple effect of all those people being involved. I've now got the electric bus company going, yeah, let's do this again. We've got 41 sites up and down the country. Any more festivals? What do you want to do? They see the future. We've got Mercedes trucks going, this is fantastic, because at the same time that we did Lido, Massive Attack also did a date in Manchester. So we proved point of concept that EV trucking for tours and arenas around the UK is possible. We did supplier, a depot to supplier to arena to festival, and back out to supplier. So we showed that you can do an arena tour. These trucks had 500 kilometers on the clock, and it's really, really easy to recharge them. The only thing we need to do, and again, not the artist's responsibility, but the venue's responsibility, is to get the power at their venues to charge those trucks so we can run clean.
And in doing so, if you've got charging points and grid connections there for charging the buses, you're going to have a big enough connection to recharge a battery to reduce the transit time for the batteries that we can use at the gigs in the interim whilst we don't have the grid connections there.
Indeed, it's not brain surgery, but I think, just I just want to celebrate everybody on this call, because what I know that, LIDA was really hard. There was a lot of work put into it. There's a lot of learning coming out of it, but the ripple effect of the broader industry and from wider society is really, really key and really, really important.
Amazing. Thank you, Jamal.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to jump in because we are at time, and I just want to say a huge thank you, Anthony, and to all the speakers, Claire, Jamal, Jake, and Ed, and also thank you, Gabby, for always pulling these brilliant talks together, and everyone at Live. Please do share the link when it goes out, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Brilliant, rich discussion. So thank you so much, and very positive thing to take into your weeks. So take care and see you next time.
Thanks.
Cheers, Ross.
Thanks so
Cheers,
much,
Gabby.
everyone.
Cheers, Anthony. Take care, guys.
Cheers,
Having
guys.
people.